She never missed a morning. Rain or shine, Marie Thompson walked the same path through downtown Dayton, Ohio, carrying a brown paper bag stuffed with a warm breakfast sandwich, an apple and a bottle of water. For 6 months, she handed it to the same man on the same bench outside the shuttered hardware store on 5th Street. He never spoke much. Just a nod. Sometimes a whisper that sounded like thank you. His clothes were filthy, his hair matted, his hands trembling as he reached for the food. She thought he was dying. She thought he had nothing. She thought she was keeping him alive. But on a cold Tuesday morning in March, everything she believed shattered in 4 words. He looked up at her with eyes that suddenly seemed clear, focused, almost amused, and said, "I'm a billionaire, Marie." She stood there, frozen, the empty bag still in her hand, her breath visible in the cold air. And then he smiled. Not the smile of a broken man. The smile of someone who had been watching her all along. Why was he there? What was he hiding? And how did one act of kindness unravel a secret that would change both their lives forever? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the story of 2 people who should never have met. Marie Thompson, 58 years old, a retired hospice nurse living alone in a modest 2-bedroom house on the edge of Dayton. She spent her days volunteering at the local community center, organizing coat drives, delivering meals to seniors. Her husband died 7 years ago from cancer. She had no children. Her life was quiet, predictable, and built around one simple principle: help people when they need it most. She didn't do it for recognition. She didn't post about it online. She just did it because it felt right. And then there was the man on the bench. The locals called him Frankie. No one knew his last name. No one asked. He appeared 6 months earlier, limping down 5th Street with a torn canvas jacket and boots held together with duct tape. He took up residence on a wooden bench outside an abandoned hardware store, the kind of spot most people walked past without looking. His left leg seemed injured. He barely moved. Some days he just stared at the ground. Other days he watched the people passing by with an expression that was hard to read. Not angry. Not sad. Just observing. Marie noticed him on her 2nd day walking that route. She bought him a coffee. The next day a sandwich. It became routine. Every morning at 7:15 she'd stop, hand him the bag, exchange a few words, and continue on her way. He never asked for anything. He never explained why he was there. And Marie never pushed. She figured everyone deserves dignity, even if they've lost everything else. But here's the question no one thought to ask until it was too late. What if he hadn't lost anything at all? What if everything Marie believed about Frankie was a lie? And what if he had been testing her the entire time? Marie Thompson wasn't the kind of person who sought attention. She lived in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where front porches still had rocking chairs and people waved when you drove by. Her house was small but tidy, with a garden out front that she tended every weekend. Tomatoes in the summer, mums in the fall. She had a routine that rarely changed. Wake up at 6. Make coffee. Walk to the diner on 5th Street. Stop by the bench. Drop off food. Head home. It was simple. It was predictable. And it gave her a sense of purpose after losing her husband, David, to lung cancer 7 years earlier. David had been a mechanic, a good man who worked with his hands and never complained. When he got sick, Marie took a leave from her job as a hospice nurse to care for him. She watched him fade slowly, painfully, until one morning he didn't wake up. After that she retired. She couldn't go back to watching people die. But she also couldn't sit still. So she found other ways to help. Volunteering. Donating. Feeding the man on the bench. Marie first saw Frankie on a September morning. She was walking her usual route when she noticed him sitting there, hunched over, his head down, his hands gripping the edge of the bench like he was holding on for dear life. He looked like he'd been through hell. His face was gaunt, his beard long and tangled, his clothes stained and torn. His left leg was stretched out awkwardly like it hurt to bend it. Marie stopped. She didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was guilt. She walked into the diner, ordered an extra sandwich and brought it back to him. He looked up at her surprised and took the bag without a word. The next day she did it again. And the day after that, it became part of her routine. She didn't know his story. She didn't need to. All she knew was that he was there and he needed help and she could give it. But over time, something about Frankie started to feel off. Not dangerous, just strange. He never asked for money. He never begged. He barely spoke. And when he did, his voice was soft, educated, like someone who had once lived a very different life. One morning Marie asked him his name. He hesitated, then said, "Frankie." She asked where he was from. He just shook his head. She asked if he had family. He looked away. It was like he was hiding something, but Marie didn't press. She figured everyone had a right to their secrets. But there were little things that didn't add up. His hands, for instance. They were dirty, but the nails were trimmed. His teeth, though yellowed, weren't rotting. His posture when he thought no one was watching was straight, almost regal. And sometimes when Marie handed him the food, he looked at her not with gratitude, but with something else. Curiosity. Like he was studying her. Like he was waiting for something. Then, about 3 weeks before everything changed, Frankie started speaking more. Not much. Just a sentence here and there. He asked Marie about her day. He asked if she lived nearby. He asked why she kept coming back. She told him the truth. Because everyone deserves kindness. He smiled at that. A sad, knowing smile. And then he said something that stuck with her. He said, "Most people only care when there's something in it for them." Marie didn't know what to say to that. She just nodded and walked away. But the words stayed with her. They made her wonder who Frankie really was. What had happened to him? Why was he so cynical? And why, despite everything, did he keep showing up on that bench every single morning? 2 days before the revelation, Frankie disappeared. Marie arrived at the bench at her usual time, but he wasn't there. She waited 10 minutes. Nothing. She came back the next day. Still nothing. She started to worry. Had he gotten sick? Had he moved on? Had something terrible happened? She asked the diner staff if they'd seen him. No one had. She asked the shopkeepers nearby. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. Marie felt a strange sense of loss. She hadn't realized how much that daily interaction meant to her until it was gone. She told herself he was probably fine. People like Frankie moved around. That's what they did. But deep down she felt uneasy. Something wasn't right. And then on the third morning, as Marie was walking home from the diner, a black luxury sedan pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. And there, sitting in the back seat, clean-shaven, clear-eyed, wearing a tailored navy suit, was Frankie. Marie stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Her heart pounded in her chest. She blinked, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The man in the car looked like Frankie. Same eyes. Same face. But everything else was different. His hair was cut short and neat. His skin was clean. His posture was confident. He wasn't limping. He wasn't trembling. He looked healthy. He looked wealthy. The driver, a man in a black suit and sunglasses, stepped out and opened the door. Frankie, or whoever he was, stepped onto the sidewalk and stood in front of Marie. She took a step back. Her mind raced. Was this some kind of trick? A scam? Was he going to hurt her? But then he spoke, and his voice was calm, almost apologetic. "Marie," he said, "I owe you an explanation." She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat was tight. Her hands were shaking. He took a breath and continued. "My name isn't Frankie. It's Franklin. Franklin Huxley. And I'm not homeless. I never was." Marie stared at him. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. He saw the confusion on her face and nodded. "I know this is a lot, but I need you to listen. Please." She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But something in his eyes made her stay. He looked sincere. Vulnerable even. So she nodded, and he began to explain. Franklin Huxley was the heir to one of the largest real estate empires in the Midwest. His family owned shopping malls, office buildings, apartment complexes across 6 states. He grew up in a world of private schools, country clubs, and board meetings. He was groomed from childhood to take over the family business. But 2 years ago, something inside him broke. His younger brother, Edward, orchestrated a coup within the company, convincing their aging father that Franklin was unstable, unfit to lead. Edward wanted control. He wanted the money. And he was willing to destroy Franklin to get it. The accusations were brutal. Edward claimed Franklin was gambling away company funds, that he was mentally ill, that he was a liability. None of it was true. But their father believed it. The board believed it. And overnight, Franklin lost everything. His position, his reputation, his identity. He tried to fight back. He hired lawyers. He gathered evidence. But Edward was smarter. He'd been planning this for years. Every meeting, every transaction, every conversation had been carefully manipulated to make Franklin look guilty. The more Franklin protested, the more unstable he seemed. Finally, after months of legal battles and public humiliation, Franklin walked away. He didn't just leave the company. He left his entire life. He disappeared. No one knew where he went. Some people thought he'd died. Others thought he'd fled the country. But Franklin did something no one expected. He wanted to understand what it felt like to have nothing, to be invisible, to see how people treated you when you had no power, no money, no name. So he became Frankie. He bought old clothes from thrift stores. He stopped shaving. He found the bench on 5th Street and made it his observation post. And he waited to see if anyone would treat him like a human being. Marie listened in stunned silence. Her mind was spinning. This man, this billionaire, had been pretending to be homeless for 6 months. He'd been watching her, testing her, and she'd had no idea. She felt betrayed, manipulated, used. But then Franklin said something that stopped her cold. You were the only one, Marie. In 6 months you were the only person who stopped, who looked me in the eye, who treated me like I mattered. His voice cracked. Everyone else walked past. They looked at me like I was garbage. Like I was nothing. But you saw me. And you helped me. Not because you wanted something. Not because you thought I'd pay you back. But because it was the right thing to do. Tears welled up in his eyes. I needed to know if people like you still existed. And you proved that they do. Marie felt something shift inside her. The anger didn't disappear, but it softened. She looked at this man, this stranger who wasn't a stranger, and saw the pain behind his eyes. He wasn't a villain. He was broken. And maybe in some strange way she had helped put a piece of him back together. But before she could respond, the driver stepped forward and handed Franklin a folder. He opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He handed it to Marie. She looked down at it, confused. It was a legal document. A trust agreement. And her name was on it. What is this? She asked. Franklin took a breath. It's $10 million, Marie. It's yours. For being the kind of person the world needs more of. Marie's legs gave out. She stumbled backward, and the driver caught her before she hit the ground. Everything went black. When Marie woke up, she was lying on her couch. Her neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, was sitting beside her, fanning her with a magazine. You fainted, honey, Mrs. Alvarez said. That man in the fancy car brought you home. Said you had a shock. Marie sat up slowly, her head pounding. It all came rushing back. Franklin. The bench. The money. She looked around. On her coffee table was the folder Franklin had given her. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was the trust document, along with a handwritten note. It read, Marie, you gave me something no amount of money could buy. You gave me hope. This is my way of saying thank you. Use it however you wish. You've earned it. Franklin. Marie didn't know what to feel. Part of her was angry. He'd lied to her. He'd used her kindness as part of some experiment. But another part of her understood. He'd been desperate. Lost. And maybe in his own twisted way. He'd been looking for proof that goodness still existed in the world. She spent the next 3 days in a fog. She didn't leave the house. She didn't answer her phone. She just sat with the folder, staring at the numbers, trying to process what had happened. $10 million. It was more money than she'd ever imagined. Could change her life. She could travel. Buy a new house. Donate to every charity she'd ever cared about. But it also felt wrong. Like she was being paid for something that should never have a price. On the 4th day, a reporter knocked on her door. Then another. And another. Somehow the story had leaked. Within hours, Marie's street was swarmed with news vans and cameras. Everyone wanted to know about the homeless billionaire and the nurse who showed him kindness. Marie refused to talk. She closed her curtains and stayed inside. But the story spread anyway. It was on the local news, then the national news, then social media. People had opinions. Some called Marie a saint. Others called Franklin a manipulative psychopath. Some accused her of being in on it from the start. The attention was suffocating. And then on the seventh day, Franklin's family showed up. Edward Huxley arrived in a black SUV with 2 lawyers and a private investigator. He knocked on Marie's door and demanded to speak with her. She let them in not because she wanted to, but because she was too tired to fight. Edward was tall, polished, and cold. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He told Marie that Franklin was mentally unstable, that the trust was invalid, and that if she tried to claim the money, his family would bury her in legal fees. He offered her $50,000 to walk away quietly, to sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear. Marie looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "No." Edward's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." Marie stood up. "The only mistake I made was opening my door for you. Now get out." The lawyers threatened her. They said she'd regret this. But Marie didn't care. She wasn't doing this for the money. She was doing it because Franklin had trusted her, and she wasn't going to let his brother bully her into silence. After they left, Marie called the one person she thought might help, a local attorney named Paul Dorsey, who'd handled her husband's estate. Paul listened to her story, reviewed the documents, and told her something that made her heart sink. The trust was real, but Edward was going to fight it, and if Franklin didn't show up to defend it, Marie would lose everything. She asked Paul if he thought Franklin would come back. Paul sighed. "Honestly, Marie, I don't know. Men like him don't usually stick around when things get messy." But 3 days later, Franklin did something no one expected. He held a press conference. He stood in front of a dozen cameras, clean-shaven and composed, and told the world everything. He explained why he'd disappeared. He explained the experiment. He explained Marie. And then he said something that shocked everyone watching. "Marie Thompson refused money from my brother because she didn't help me for a reward. She helped me because she's a good person. And if my family tries to take that away from her, I will spend every dollar I have fighting them in court." The room erupted in questions. But Franklin didn't answer. He just walked off the stage. The video went viral. And suddenly Marie wasn't just a story. She was a symbol. The legal battle took 4 months. Edward Huxley filed motion after motion, claiming Franklin was incompetent, that the trust was fraudulent, that Marie had manipulated him. Franklin's lawyers fought back hard. They presented medical records proving Franklin was of sound mind. They showed evidence of Edward's betrayal. They brought in witnesses who testified that Franklin had been planning this for months, that it wasn't impulsive or irrational. But the strongest evidence came from something no one expected. Franklin had been recording everything. Every morning Marie stopped at the bench, there was a hidden camera across the street, tucked inside a streetlight. Franklin had footage of every interaction, every sandwich, every conversation, every moment Marie treated him like a human being when the rest of the world ignored him. The footage was played in court. The room was silent as people watched Marie, day after day, stopping to help a man she believed had nothing. There was no performative kindness, no cameras, no audience, just a quiet, consistent act of compassion. One juror cried. Even the judge seemed moved. Edward's lawyers tried to argue that the recordings were invasive, that they violated Marie's privacy, but Franklin's team countered that the footage proved intent. It proved that Marie's kindness was genuine, and it proved that Franklin's decision to reward her was rational and well considered. The judge ruled in Franklin's favor. The trust was valid. Marie was entitled to the full $10 million. Edward stormed out of the courtroom. He didn't speak to the press. He didn't look at Franklin. He just left. And Franklin, for the first time in 2 years, looked at peace. After the verdict, Franklin asked to speak with Marie privately. They met in a small conference room in the courthouse. For a long time, neither of them said anything. Then Franklin spoke. "I know this has been hard for you. I'm sorry." Marie looked at him. "Why did you really do this, Franklin? Was it just an experiment?" He shook his head. At first maybe, but after a while it became something else. You reminded me that people can still be good. That kindness isn't dead. And I needed that reminder more than you know. Marie sighed. I don't want the money, Franklin. He looked surprised. Why not? Because I didn't do it for money. I did it because it was right. And taking $10 million for being a decent person feels wrong. Franklin smiled sadly. I understand. But the money isn't payment, Marie. It's a tool. Use it to keep being the person you are. Help more people. Build something that lasts. That's all I'm asking. Marie thought about it. And finally she nodded. Okay, but on one condition. What's that? You stop hiding. You take back your life. You fight for what's yours. And you stop running. Franklin extended his hand. Marie shook it. And in that moment something shifted. Two broken people, brought together by an act of kindness, had found a way to heal. 6 months later, Franklin Huxley stood in front of the board of directors at Huxley Enterprises. He'd spent half a year rebuilding his reputation, gathering allies and preparing for this moment. Edward sat at the far end of the table, his face tight with anger. Their father, Gerald Huxley, sat at the head of the table, old and frail but still sharp. Franklin presented his case calmly, methodically. He showed evidence of Edward's manipulation. He showed financial records proving Edward had been siphoning money from the company. He showed emails, texts, recorded phone calls. By the end of the presentation, the room was silent. Gerald looked at Edward. Is this true? Edward didn't answer. He just stood up and walked out. Gerald turned to Franklin. I'm sorry, son. I should have believed you. Franklin nodded. I know, Dad. The board voted unanimously to reinstate Franklin as CEO. Edward was removed from the company and faced criminal charges for embezzlement. Franklin didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He just got to work. And the first thing he did was announce a $50 million initiative to build affordable housing and shelters for the homeless across Ohio. He named the project Marie's Promise. Marie attended the press conference. She stood beside Franklin as he announced the initiative, and when reporters asked her how she felt, she simply said, I hope this reminds people that kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. Marie used her $10 million to start a nonprofit. She called it the Bench Foundation. It provided meals, job training, and mental health support to people experiencing homelessness. She didn't do interviews. She didn't seek fame. She just worked. Quietly. Consistently. The way she always had. Franklin stayed in touch. They met for coffee once a month. They talked about life, about loss, about second chances. They became unlikely friends. And every year, on the anniversary of the day they met, Franklin would sit on that same bench on 5th Street. And Marie would bring him a sandwich. Not because he needed it, but because some rituals are worth keeping. So here's the question I want you to think about. What would you have done in Marie's place? If a man you've been feeding for months suddenly revealed he was a billionaire, would you trust him? Would you accept the money? Or would you walk away? And here's the harder question. How many people do you walk past every day without seeing them? How many Frankies are sitting on benches, invisible, waiting for someone to treat them like they matter? Marie didn't change the world because she was extraordinary. She changed it because she was consistent. Because she showed up. Because she cared when no one else did. Leave a comment below and tell me what you think. Would you have believed Franklin? Would you have taken the money? And have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? I want to hear your stories. If this video made you feel something, hit that subscribe button. We've got more incredible true stories coming your way. Stories about people who did the right thing when no one was watching. Stories that'll make you question everything you thought you knew. And if this one shocked you, wait until you hear what happened when a school janitor revealed his true identity. That one's coming next week. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change someone's entire world.